The Malthari command vessel, Eclipse Dawn, hung in the void like a sliver of frozen lightning, its hull a seamless fusion of crystalline, silver, and flowing violet alloys. Bioluminescent panels pulsed along its flanks, casting shifting auroras across the darkness, beautiful, precise, and utterly alien. High Commander Malvar stood at the observation deck, his four-fingered hands clasped behind his back, watching the distant blue-green orb of Terra through the translucent membrane of the viewport. His thoughts were a storm of calculation. This should have been simple. Volve, the Malthari Dominion, had absorbed countless species into its fold, some through diplomacy, most through superior force. Their technology was unmatched, their fleets undefeated. Yet here they were, lingering at the edge of a system inhabited by a species barely out of their cradle. Thelilin, the Dominion's foremost sinologist, approached with measured steps, his elongated limbs moving with the grace of wind-swept reeds. His voice was a whisper of ionized air. The beacons were clear, Commander. They called this world a sleeping giant. Malvar's mandibles twitched in irritation. Beacons are relics. The humans are fractured, divided among themselves. They wage war over petty borders, burn their own world with primitive combustion. They are not a threat. Thelilin's bioluminescent veins dimmed slightly, a sign of unease. And yet, their history suggests adaptability. They have risen from destruction before. Malvar dismissed the concern with a flick of his wrist. They are animals. Clever perhaps, but animals nonetheless. The Dominion does not fear fire because it burns, we control it. A data stream flickered across the curved display before them. Scans of human military installations, their crude metal constructs, their laughably slow projectile weapons. Malvar almost pitied them. Then the alert came. A ripple in the void, a distortion where none should exist. Thelilin's fingers danced across the floating interface, his voice tightening. Commander, something is approaching. Malvar's instincts flared. Show me. The screen resolved into a nightmare. A human warship, no, not a warship, a bastion. A monstrous slab of reinforced alloys and angular plating, bristling with weapon ports, its hull scarred from battles the Malthari had never witnessed. It moved wrong, its thrusters silent, its approach too smooth, too controlled. And then it spoke, not through comms, not through any frequency the Malthari could detect. It spoke by S-firing, a railgun round, accelerated to a fraction of light speed, punched through the S, eclipsed Dawn's outermost shield layer like a needle through silk. Alarms shrieked, the deck trembled, Malvar's blood ran cold. The humans should not have been able to do that. Thelilin's voice was hollow. They were waiting for us. And then the second shot came. The second railgun round struck with surgical precision. It did not aim for the eclipsed Dawn's engines, nor its command spire. No, it carved through the Malthari vessel's primary shield generator, a structure woven from flowing aurora, colored alloys and ionized plasma conduits. The impact was obscene in its efficiency. The generator's crystalline lattice shattered like glass, its purple, white energy streams flickering out in a dying gasp. Malvar's claws dug into the command dais. His crew moved in stunned silence, their bioluminescent markings pulsing erratically. Fear made visible. This was impossible. The humans should not have been able to see the shield generator, let alone target it with such lethal accuracy. Malthari technology was fluid, ever shifting, its components hidden within organic curves and wind-carved architecture. Yet the humans had struck without hesitation, as if they had studied the Dar's eclipsed Dawn schematics for years. Thelilin's voice was a whisper. Their sensors. They see through us. Malvar's mind raced. The ancient beacons had spoken of Terra's children, Azellar's sleeping giants. But the Malthari High Conclave had dismissed the warnings as myth. The galaxy's dominant powers had long believed humanity to be fractured. Their weapons crude, their tactics predictable. They were wrong. The human bastion loomed closer on the viewscreen, its angular hull drinking in the starlight. It was not sleek like Malthari vessels, nor elegant. It was brutal, a fortress forged from scarred metal and cold intent. And now it was turning. Malvar's breath caught. Along its flank, a series of hexagonal ports irised open. Inside, something unmoved. Aboard the human warship Iron Resolve, Major Teyla Grogan watched the alien vessel through the crosshairs of her tactical display. The Malthari ship was beautiful in a way, its flowing silver, violet hull like frozen wind given form. A shame she had to break it. Secondary batteries locked, Captain Rodney McKay reported, his fingers dancing across the fire control interface. Their shields are down. They're running scans, but our ECM is frying their systems. Teyla didn't smile. This wasn't a victory yet. The Malthari had made the oldest mistake in the book. They had assumed. Assumed humanity was weak. Assumed they wouldn't fight back. They had assumed wrong. Launch the swarm, she ordered. McKay hesitated for only a second. Ma'am, that's... A shudder ran through the Iron Resolve as the hexagonal ports expelled their payload, not missiles, not drones, but seeds. Thousands of them, each no larger than a fist, tumbling silently toward the eclipse dawn. The Malthari sensors would register them as debris. Harmless. They would be wrong, Malvar's instincts screamed. The human vessel had released something. But his scanners showed only fragmented returns, as if the objects were slipping between reality and static. His crew worked frantically, their flowing interfaces flaring with emergency protocols. Then the first seed attached. It struck the eclipse dawn's hull with a soundless impact, and melted into the metal. The Malthari alloy, designed to self-repair, convulsed as foreign code infiltrated its molecular structure. Thelalan's voice was raw with disbelief. They're hacking our ship. Malvar's blood turned to ice. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their railguns. It was their hunger to understand. And now, they were learning Zevnim. The eclipse dawn shuddered. Not from impact, not from weapons fire, but from infection. Malvar watched in frozen horror as the ship's bioluminescent veins flickered, their steady purple, white glow stuttering into erratic pulses. The organic metal alloy of the hull, a masterpiece of Malthari engineering, twitched under the assault. It was as if the ship itself were recoiling from a parasite burrowing beneath its skin. Thelalan's hands danced across the crystalline interface, his normally composed features twisted in disbelief. The data streams scrolling before him made no sense. The human seeds weren't just infiltrating the ship's systems, they were rewriting them. Command protocols dissolved into gibberish. Navigation matrices collapsed into fractal chaos. Even the atmospheric regulators, designed to maintain the ship's delicate internal balance, spasmed as foreign logic overwrote their functions. They're not just hacking us, Thelalan whispered. They're teaching the ship to speak their language. Malvar's claws flexed involuntarily. The Malthari had always prided themselves on their technology, fluid alive, superior to the crude mechanical constructs of lesser species. Their ships were extensions of their own bodies, grown rather than built, their systems as natural as breathing. And now, humanity had found a way to infect that breath. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Major Teyla Grogan watched the unfolding chaos with cold satisfaction. The Malthari had scanned Earth's fleets, analyzed their weapons, dismissed them as predictable. They had seen the railguns, the plasma lances, the nuclear payloads, but they had never truly understood what they were dealing with. Because humanity's greatest strength wasn't in the weapons they wielded. It was in the scars they carried. Centuries of war had taught them one brutal truth: adapt or die. And so they had learned, not just to fight, but to consume. To take the tools of their enemies and make them their own. The seeds now burrowing into this eclipse dawn weren't mere code disruptors. They were translators, designed to dissect alien technology, learn its logic, and then turn it against itself. Captain Rodney McKay exhaled sharply beside her. They're panicking. Teyla didn't answer. She didn't need to. The Malthari ship's erratic movements told her everything. Their perfect, flowing vessel was now jerking like a wounded animal, its once graceful arcs reduced to desperate, shuddering corrections. Let them feel what it was like to lose control. Malvar's mind raced. The eclipsed dawn was dying, not from external damage, but from caused corruption. The human seeds had infiltrated deeper than had thought possible, worming into the ship's neural lattice, rewriting its very instincts. Alarms blared in dissonant harmonics as entire sections of the vessel went dark, their crystalline structures dimming like extinguished stars. His crew scrambled, their movements frantic, their voices rising in disbelief. This wasn't supposed to happen. Malthari technology was superior. It was evolved. It was falling apart in front of him. Thelalin's voice cut through the chaos. We have to sever the infected systems. Now. Malvar hesitated. Severing the ship's neural links would cripple them, blind them, mute them, leave them adrift. But the alternative was worse. He gave the order. The eclipsed dawn screamed as it amputated its own limbs. Teyla's lips curled. The Malthari ship had gone dark, its radiant energy signatures flickering out one by one as it severed its own connections. A desperate move. A painful one, but not enough, because the seeds had already learned what they needed. And now humanity knew how to hurt them. Really hurt them. She turned to McKay. Tell Command we're ready for Phase 2. The war had just begun. The eclipsed dawn drifted in the void, its once glorious bioluminescent veins now darkened, its flowing energy currents severed like slashed arteries. Malvar stood motionless on the command dais, his talons digging into the crystalline railing. The silence was worse than the screams of his crew. The silence meant they had lost something irreplaceable. Malthari ships were not mere vessels. They were extensions of their pilots, living symphonies of thought and motion, their neural links as intimate as breath. To sever them was to amputate a limb. And now, the dawn was a crippled beast, blind and bleeding power into the void. Thelalin's voice was a whisper, barely audible over the hum of emergency backups. The infection is contained. For now. Malvar didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the tactical display, where the human warship loomed like a predator circling wounded prey. It shouldn't have been possible. The Malthari Dominion had encountered countless species, absorbed their technologies, refined them into something as greater. Their ships were living art, their weapons elegant and precise, their shields woven from the very fabric of ionized atmosphere. A human-as virus had unraveled them, not brute force, not overwhelming firepower, ingenuity. The realization settled in his chest like a shard of ice. On the bridge of the Iron Resolve, Teyla Grogan watched the Malthari vessel's death throes with cold satisfaction. The alien ship's once radiant hull was now a corpse light, its flowing energy signatures reduced to sporadic flickers. McKay exhaled sharply beside her. They cut their own links. That's extreme. Teyla's fingers traced the edge of the holodisplay. They had no choice. The Malthari had underestimated them. They had assumed human technology was crude, unrefined, just as they had assumed human-as minds were simple. A fatal mistake, because humanity had spent centuries perfecting one art above all others: adaptation. The Malthari ships were alive, their systems interconnected, their defenses seamless. And that was their weakness. Teyla's team hadn't just hacked their systems. They had taught the virus to learn, to evolve, to hunt. And now, the eclipsed dawn was the first to learn the price of arrogance. Thelalin's claws trembled as he parsed the last fragments of corrupted data. The human signal had been more than a weapon. It had been S message. S buried in the wreckage of their firewalls was a repeating sequence, an ancient broadcast echoing across frequencies the Malthari had long dismissed as cosmic noise. "This is not your first mistake," Thelolin murmured. Malvar turned, his crest flaring. "Explain." Thelolin's voice was hollow. "The humans didn't just attack us. They answered us. He pulled up the recovered transmission, a looping signal, older than their records, older than their empire. A beacon, hidden in dead space, whispering the same phrase for millennia. Beware the sleeping giants of Terra. Malvar's blood ran cold. The galaxy had known, and the Malthari had ignored it. Teyla's calm crackled. Command confirms. The old signals are live. She allowed herself a grim smile. Centuries ago, humanity had seeded the stars with warnings, not cries for help, but promises. Now, the Malthari would learn why. Prepare the next wave, she ordered. The war had begun, and humanity was just getting started. The Malthari fleet hung in the void, like a shattered constellation, their once pristine vessels, now bleeding streams of ionized plasma into the dark. High Commander Malvar stood motionless on the command spire, his talons flexing against the smooth, organic alloy of the deck. The air hummed with the scent of scorched crystal and burnt ozone, the aftermath of human fire. Their mistake had been one of a scale. They had expected desperation, perhaps a final, futile resistance. Instead, the humans had struck with the precision of a surgeon's blade, carving through their forward lines before they even realized they were bleeding. Malvar's secondary heart pulsed erratically as he studied the tactical feed. The human ships moved unlike anything in Malthari doctrine, not the elegant, flowing formations of his own people, nor the brute, forced charges of the Kelder. They danced. A destroyer would feint left, drawing fire, while a swarm of needle-thin frigates slipped beneath their shields, detonating munitions that didn't just pierce armor. They unwove it, molecular bonds collapsing like sand in a fist. And then there was the S sound. The humans weaponized it. Their vessels screamed across the void, broadcasting distorted harmonics that resonated with Malthari neural clusters. Entire crews had collapsed mid-maneuver, their nervous systems misfiring, as if their very biology rebelled against them. They knew. Thelolin whispered beside him, his voice raw. The scientist's bioluminescent markings flickered erratically, a sign of distress. They knew how we think, how we fight. Malvar didn't answer, his gaze locked onto the wreckage of the S-Dawn's resolve. Its crystalline spires snapped like twigs. The humans had left it intact, not out of mercy, but as a message. A single phrase, etched in plasma across its hull. You should have listened. On the bridge of the UNS Vanguard, Major Teyla Grogan exhaled slowly, rolling the tension from her shoulders. The first strike had been flawless. The Malthari had expected a hammer. They'd received a scalpel. Behind her, Captain McKay adjusted his headset, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. They're regrouping, he muttered. But they're slower. Hesitant. Teyla nodded. Good, fear was a weapon too. The ancient beacons had done their job, whispering warnings into the dark, priming the galaxy to see humanity as something to be feared. But the Malthari had dismissed them as relics, as myth. Now, they understood. Teyla tapped a command into her console. Across the fleet, dormant systems flared to life, their energy signatures rippling like storm fronts. The Malthari scanners would be reading it now, the sudden, impossible surge of power, the realization that the humans had been holding back. Second wave ready, Major, McKay confirmed. Teyla's lips curled, let them see what came next. The Malthari command vessel, Eclipse Dawn, shuddered as another wave of human weaponry carved through their forward defenses. High Commander Malvar gripped the railing of the observation platform, his crystalline talons biting into the smooth, organic alloy. The bridge hummed with panicked energy, the air thick with the ozone scent of overloading systems. Bioluminescent panels flickered erratically, casting jagged violet shadows across the faces of his crew. They had been so certain. The ancient warnings, those drifting beacons, whispering of Terra's hidden wrath, had been dismissed as superstition. The Malthari Dominion had crushed empires before. What were humans but another fragile species, fractious and divided, their technology crude, their resolve untested? Malvar's secondary eyelids flicked shut for a fraction of a second, a reflexive gesture of distress. The holographic display before him painted a nightmare in shimmering auroras. The human fleet moved like nothing he had ever seen. Not the rigid, predictable formations of the Malthari, nor the elegant but inflexible battle dances of the Malthari. No, this was something else entirely, a swarm of predators, each ship adjusting in real time, reacting not just to his maneuvers, but to his intentions. "Hi, Commander." Thelalin's voice was a strained whisper. The scientists' normally vibrant bioluminescence dimmed to a sickly pallor. Their energy signatures, they're not just masking their output. They're cycling it. Malvar didn't need the explanation. He could see it himself. The human vessels pulsed like living things, their power cores flaring and receding in deliberate waves. One moment, their profiles read as barely armed scouts. The next, their weapons unleashed storms of fire that melted Malthari shielding like ice in a forge. A deception, of trap. His mandibles clenched. The humans had let them believe they were winning. Had allowed the Malthari to commit, to overextend, and now the tide was turning. On the bridge of the Wyve-Iron Resolve, Major Teyla Grogan watched the Malthari fleet's confusion unfold with cold satisfaction. The enemy's formations were fraying at the edges, their coordination slipping as panic set in. She could almost hear their commanders shouting over comms, scrambling to recalibrate their strategies against a foe that refused to fight the way they expected. "McKay," she said, her voice steady. "Activate the Serpent's Gambit." Captain Rodney McKay's grin was a blade in the dim light. "With pleasure." Across the human fleet, a new signal flared to life. A cascade of encrypted data bursts, invisible to Malthari sensors until it was far too late. The drones they had dismissed as debris, the seemingly crippled ships they had ignored as casualties of war, all of them awoke at once. The Malthari had assumed the humans fought with desperation. They were about to learn they fought with Ever's patience. Malvar's crest of sensory filaments stood rigid as the first drones struck. They emerged from the wreckage of earlier skirmishes, their hulls blackened and scorched to mimic destruction. Now, they unfolded like mechanical horrors, their weapons systems humming to life with lethal precision. Evasive. The order died in his throat as the Dawes eclipsed Dawn's shields, buckled under a concentrated railgun volley. The impact sent tremors through the deck, and somewhere deep in the ship's organic infrastructure, something screamed, a sound like fracturing crystal. Thelolin staggered, his four-fingered hands braced against a console. "They knew," he breathed. "They knew our shield harmonics, our blind spots." Malvar didn't let him finish. Because the truth was worse, the humans hadn't just studied them. They had waited for this moment, and now, the Malthari Dominion would learn the price of underestimating a species that had spent its entire history preparing for war. The was-eclipsed Dawn reeled. Its once graceful organic hull, now a fractured ruin of splintered crystal and smoldering aerogel. Malvar's claws dug into the command throne as another impact rocked the ship, sending violet energy conduits spitting raw plasma across the bridge. The air stank of ionized ozone and something worse, samber fear. The humans had not just ambushed them. They had orchestrated this. Thelalin's bioluminescent markings flickered erratically, his voice barely audible over the groaning of the ship's dying infrastructure. Their targeting systems, they're not just adaptive. They're learning. Malvar's crest flattened against his skull. He had seen war before. The Dominion's conquests were legendary, their fleets unstoppable. But this was something else. On the tactical display, the human warships moved with terrifying synchronicity. Not the rigid formations of Malthari doctrine, nor the chaotic swarms of lesser species. They flowed like a living thing, each vessel reacting not just to the battle, but to each other. And then the transmissions began. Earth, 3 hours earlier, Major Teyla Grogan stood in the dim glow, of the United Earth Defense Command's war room, her fingers tracing the holographic projection of the Malthari fleet's approach vector. The air hummed with tension, the scent of recycled oxygen and stale coffee thick in the enclosed space. "They're here," Captain Rodney Mackay muttered beside her, his knuckles white around his datapad. "Just like we predicted." Teyla didn't answer. She didn't need to. For decades, Earth's fractured nations had bickered, divided by borders and ideologies. But when the first Malthari probe had been detected skimming the edges of the solar system, something had changed. The world had united, not in speeches, not in treaties, in silence. Every nation, every faction, every rogue black site researcher, they had all looked at the alien signatures on their screens and understood, in that single, chilling moment, what it meant to be prey. And humanity had never been good at being prey. The Malthari fleet had expected resistance, they had expected desperation. They had not expected this. The first wave of human drones had been a feint, sacrificial pawns, their wreckage seeding the battlefield with hidden munitions. The second wave had been railgun barrages, precise and relentless, hammering the Malthari shields at their harmonic weak points. But the third wave was something Malvar's tactical A's couldn't even categorize. The human ships, small, by galactic standards, suddenly shifted. Their hulls reconfigured mid-burn, shedding armor plating to reveal secondary thrusters, their vectors altering in ways that defied conventional physics. "Gravity manipulation," Thelilin whispered, his voice hollow. Malvar didn't answer, because the answer was worse. It wasn't gravity tech, it was human pilots. Unafraid, unrelenting, unbreakable. And then the as eclipsed Dom's comms array crackled to life. A voice, calm and clear, cut through the static. Malthari vessel. This is Major Teyla Grogan of the United Earth Defense Force. You have entered sovereign human space. Power down your weapons. Surrender or be destroyed. For the first time in his long, decorated career, High Commander Malvar felt something alien stir in his chest. Because the humans weren't just fighting, they were winning. And the galaxy would never be the same. The Malthari flagship, Eclipsed Dawn, hung in the void, its once pristine crystalline hull now scarred by human railgun fire. Streaming purple, white energy flickered erratically from breached conduits. The ship's organic architecture groaning under the strain of emergency containment fields. Inside the detention block, the air hummed with the low-frequency resonance of failing power cores. Thelilin, his silver, carapaced fingers trembling over a bioluminescent datapad, studied the human prisoner through the translucent energy barrier. Captain Rodney Mackay sat cross-legged on the floor, his wrists bound in Malthari stasis cuffs, a precaution, given what their scans had revealed about human physiology. His uniform was torn, his face smeared with soot from the battle, but his eyes burned with an intensity that made Thelilin's secondary eyelids flicker shut in instinctive unease. This creature should be terrified. Yet Mackay's pulse, according to the bio-readouts, remained steady. His breathing was controlled, his posture relaxed, as if he were waiting for a delayed transport, not imprisonment aboard an alien warship. Malvar's voice crackled through Thelilin's cranial implant. Interrogate him. Find their weakness. Thelilin hesitated. The Malthari had studied human psychology, knew their species was prone to fear, to irrational outbursts, to crumbling under pressure. But Mackay's stillness defied categorization. The energy barrier shimmered as Thelilin stepped through, his elongated limbs folding into a formal stance. "You are alone," he began, modulating his voice into the harmonic resonance, known to unsettle mammalian species. "Your fleet is in retreat. Your commanders have abandoned you." Mackay tilted his head. Then, slowly, he smiled. Thelilin's dorsal spines twitched. "You don't get it, do you?" Mackay said, his voice rough but amused. "We don't do retreat." A proximity alarm blared. Thelilin's datapod lit up with frantic glyphs, a ship small and angular, had latched onto this Eclipse Dawn's ventral hull. No, not a ship, a boarding pod. Human design. Valor's impossible. Their shields should have. The deck shuddered. Distant screams echoed through the corridors, punctuated by the staccato rhythm of projectile weapons. Thelalin's tertiary heart spasmed. McKay stood, rolling his shoulders as if working out a kink. "See. Here's the thing about humans," he said, flexing his fingers. The stasis cuffs sizzled, their energy fields destabilizing. "We don't leave our people behind." Thelolin backpedaled, his carapace flushing pale violet in alarm. The cuffs fractured, their crystalline matrix crumbling to dust. McKay lunged. Outside the detention block, the Eclipse Dawn's corridors erupted in chaos. Human soldiers, clad in blackened combat armor. Their visors glowing hellish red, moved with terrifying efficiency. They didn't just breach bulkheads, they hacked them. Their tools emitting strange electromagnetic pulses that made Malthari technology writhe like living tissue. One warrior, taller than the rest, tore through a squad of Malthari sentinels with a blade that hummed at frequencies designed to resonate with their crystalline biology. The aliens collapsed, their bodies vibrating apart at the molecular level. Malvar's voice roared through the ship-wide comms. "Contain them." But containment was impossible, because the humans weren't just attacking, they were learning. McKay, now armed with a scavenged plasma pistol, ducked into a maintenance conduit, his fingers dancing across the alien control panels with terrifying intuition. The ship's internal schematics flickered in his mind, assembled from stolen data bursts and half-decoded transmissions. Thelolin, staggering after him, felt something colder than fear settle in his thorax. They adapt. They always adapt. And then the Eclipse Dawn's core reactor screamed a warning. McKay had rerouted the auxiliary power, not to escape, to overload. Thelalin's final transmission to Malvar was a single, static, lace glyph, she terminus. Hang outside the ship. Major Teyla Grogan watched this. Eclipse Dawn's energy signature spike into the lethal spectrum. She didn't give the order to fire. She didn't need to. McKay had already made his choice. The explosion lit the void like a dying star, its shockwave rippling through the Malthari fleet. And in that moment, the galaxy remembered why ancient beacons had warned of Terra. Humans didn't just fight to survive, they fought to win. No matter the cost, the Eclipse Dawn's death throes painted the void in auroras of violet and white, the bioluminescent remnants of its organic hull fracturing like shattered glass. The shockwave rippled outward, distorting the Malthari fleet's formation, their crystalline ships shuddering as though recoiling from a predator's strike. Malvar stood frozen on the bridge, a veil of dominion, his silver, carved fingers tightening around the command rail. The energy readings still burned across his vision, impossible, unthinkable numbers. The human warship hadn't just self-destructed, it had weaponized its own annihilation, channeling the reactor's collapse into a directed pulse that scarred the Malthari vanguard. 3 frigates, their flowing metal alloys now twisted into grotesque sculptures, tumbled lifelessly through the dark. Terminus. Thelalin's final glyph echoed in Malvar's mind, its meaning heavier than any tactical report. This wasn't mere defiance, this was doctrine. On the tactical display, the remaining human vessels, scarred, outnumbered, did not flee. Instead, they advanced, their thrusters flaring crimson against the void. Their formation was ragged, their hulls pocked with iron burns. Yet they moved with the eerie precision of a closing fist. Malvar's secondary heart stuttered. They should have broken. Every simulation, every war, game projection had assured him that human forces, when cornered, would fracture into disarray. Their species was too emotional, too individualistic, to maintain cohesion under such losses. Yet here they were, not just holding the line, a pushing back. A Major Teyla Grogan exhaled slowly, her fingers hovering over the tactical console. The Eclipse Dawn's last transmission still flickered on her screen. McKay's final coordinates, The reactors fail, safes manually overridden, his voice steady to the end. Tell my niece I kept my promise. She closed her eyes for half a second. Then she opened them, and her voice cut through the Resolute's bridge like a blade. All batteries, fire pattern Delta. Target their command relays. The human fleet responded as one. Railgun salvos tore through the Malthari lines, their hypervelocity rounds leaving contrails of ionized plasma. The aliens' energy shields flared, beautiful, cascading ripples of purple, white before buckling under the barrage. Unlike Malthari weapons, which flowed like liquid light, human munitions as punchied, each impact a hammer blow of Newtonian brutality. And then the F-Resolute's secondary weapons activated. Malvar's sensors screamed as the human ship unleashed its hidden payload, a swarm of hunter-killer drones, each no larger than a human hand. Their edges haunted monomolecular sharpness. They moved like living things, weaving through the Malthari point defense grid with terrifying adaptability. Where they struck, they didn't just disable systems, they have infested them, their viral protocols rewriting alien code in real time. One of the drones latched onto the Veil of Dominion's primary sensor array. Malvar watched in horror as the crystalline surface darkened, the aurora, like glow of its energy channels flickering, then dying. They're learning. They're always learning. Thelon had been right. Malvar's mandibles clenched as he issued the order he had never imagined speaking. The word tasted like ash. The Malthari fleet, Sula's fleet, the pride of the 7th Celestial Armada, began to disengage, their elegant ships twisting away from the human advance. It was not a rout, not yet, but the message was clear. They had come to crush a lesser species. Instead, they had awakened something far older, far hungrier. As the Resolute's guns fell silent, Teyla watched the alien vessels vanish into the void, their luminous trails fading like dying stars. She didn't smile, didn't cheer, she simply keyed the fleet-wide channel, her voice quiet but unshakable. All ships, stand down. But stay sharp, because the Malthari would return. And when they did, humanity would be waiting. The silence after battle was always heavier than the fighting itself. Teyla Grogan stood on the command deck of the Resolute, her fingers resting lightly on the tactical display. The Malthari fleet had withdrawn, their sleek, crystalline vessels folding back into the void like shadows retreating from dawn. Their energy signatures, those flowing ribbons of purple, white light, dimmed as they slipped beyond sensor range. But this was not over, she knew it in her bones. Across the bridge, McKay exhaled sharply, his grip on his rifle finally loosening. His knuckles were white from tension, his breath still uneven. He had seen the Malthari up close, had watched their bioluminescent armor flicker as they died under human fire. They had fought like warriors, yes, but they had also underestimated. And that had been their undoing. Teyla turned her gaze to the main view screen, where the remnants of the engagement still lingered. Twisted metal, shattered crystalline hulls, the faint aurora of dissipating energy. The Malthari had come expecting to face a species still bound by the limits of gravity and crude kinetics. Instead, they had met humanity's answer to their arrogance. Her lips thinned. They would not make that mistake again. On the celestial dawn, Malvar stood motionless in the dim glow of his command chamber. The walls pulsed faintly with the ship's organic tech, the translucent panels flickering as if wounded. He had never known defeat, not like this. Thelon approached, his normally fluid movements stiff with something Malvar had never seen in him before, a doubt. The scientist's bioluminescent markings flickered erratically, betraying his unease. "Psst, they adapted," Thelon murmured, his voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's core. "Psst, not just their weapons, their tactics, their ships, they were learning as they fought." The squaz Malvar's mandibles twitched. That was the horror of it. The humans had not simply matched Malthari technology, they had absorbed it. Their vessels, once blocky and inelegant, now bore traces of adaptive shielding. Their energy signatures laced with the same ionization patterns as Malthari drives. They had taken what they needed and made it deadlier. Aboard this Resolute, McKay finally holstered his weapon. "Orders, Major," he asked, his voice rough. Teyla didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached for the comm panel, her fingers hovering over the encryption protocols. Then she made her decision. "Open a channel," she said. "Full spectrum. Every frequency we've got." McKay frowned. "Sir!" She met his gaze. "They think we're just survivors. Just a prey." Her voice hardened. "It's time they learned what we really are." The tech officer hesitated, only a second before complying. The transmission blazed out, not in code, not in whispers, but in the open. A declaration. The signal reached celestial dawn moments later. Malvar's crest flared in alarm as the comm systems lit up, their crystalline surfaces shimmering with the force of the incoming transmission. Then the human's voice filled the chamber. "This is Major Teyla Grogan of the United Earth Defense Fleet." Her words were calm, precise, and utterly without fear. "You came to our system expecting an easy victory. You thought us weak, divided, primitive." A pause. "You were wrong." The screen flickered, then resolved into a single image. This Resolute, its hull scarred but unbroken, floating against the void, and behind it, toiled more ships. Dozens, hundreds. Not the battered remnants of a dying species, but a fleet. New vessels, their designs already evolving, their weapons humming with barely restrained power. Thelalan's breath caught. Malvar felt something cold coil in his chest. The human's voice continued, inexorable. "This is your only warning. Turn back, or the next time we meet, we won't stop at driving you away." The transmission ended. Across the Malthari armada, a ripple of something unfamiliar spread, but the first, creeping shadow of doubt. Teyla leaned back, exhaling slowly. The message had been sent. Now, they would see if the Malthari were wise enough to listen, or if humanity would have to teach them another lesson. She flexed her fingers, feeling the weight of what was coming. Either way, they would be ready. The Malthari armada hung in the void, their sleek, organic hulls shimmering with the faint aurora of ionized energy. The command deck of the Eclipse Sovereign was silent, the usual hum of flowing power currents muted, as if the ship itself held its breath. Malvar stood before the holographic display, his crystalline fingers tracing the edges of the human fleet's formation. The data streams pulsed in violet, white, each flicker a confirmation of what he already knew. Earth was not merely surviving. It was preparing. Thelalan's voice was a whisper, barely audible over the ambient hum of the ship's bio-luminescent systems. Their rate of technological adaptation, it defies all projections. Malvar did not respond. He had seen the scars on the human warships, the scorch marks of plasma lances, the gouges left by kinetic strikes. Yet they still flew, still fought. Worse, they had learned. The crude railguns of their first engagements had given way to hybridized systems, their projectiles now sheathed in the same ionized fields the Malthari used to deflect energy fire. A ripple passed through the command deck as the tactical array updated. New signatures flared to life along the edges of the Sol system, shipyards, hidden behind asteroid belts and lunar shadows, their skeletal frameworks already birthing fresh hulls. They are building faster than we can destroy. The thought was a cold weight in Malvar's chest. On Earth, Major Teyla Grogan stood in the dim glow of the Orbital Defense Command Center, her reflection fractured across a dozen tactical screens. The room was alive with quiet urgency, officers murmuring into headsets, their voices steady despite the tension coiling beneath the surface. She studied the Malthari fleet's positioning. They had not retreated. But they had not advanced, either. They're hesitating. A rare thing. For a species that had once carved through the outer colonies like a storm through wheat. Captain McKay stepped beside her, his arms crossed. His uniform was rumpled, the dark circles under his eyes a testament to the weeks without rest. "They're waiting for something," he muttered. Teyla nodded. "Or recalculating." The Malthari had expected a broken enemy. Instead, they had found a system bristling with defiance, its people welding together every scrap of technology, every stolen shred of Malthari knowledge, into something new. And now the aliens had seen it. Now they knew. Back aboard the Eclipse Sovereign, Thelalin's fingers danced across the analysis console, the data streams painting a picture that made his secondary heart stutter. The humans had not just repaired their damaged ships. They had improved them. The Indomitable, the vessel that had first defied them, now bore modifications that should have taken decades to engineer. Its armor had been reforged with layered composites, its railgun arrays recalibrated to fire in staggered, shield-piercing volleys, and then there were the new signatures, smaller, faster. "Interceptor class," Thelilin murmured, the designation pulled from intercepted human transmissions. They were not warships, not truly, they were hunters, designed not to stand in battle lines, but to slip between them, to strike at engines, at command decks, at the vulnerable seams of Malthari vessels. Malvar's voice cut through the silence. "Their adaptability is concerning." A diplomatic understatement. Thelilin glanced at the tactical feed. The human fleet was not merely regrouping. It was expanding. New vessels slid into formation, their designs already diverging, some armored like siege breakers, others lean and predatory. And behind them, the shipyards glowed like embers in the dark. They are not just defending. They are preparing to strike back. Teyla watched the Malthari fleet's energy signatures flicker, their formations shifting subtly, as if uncertain. She allowed herself a slow, grim smile. They feel it now. The weight of the unknown. The fear of an enemy that refused to break. She turned to McKay. "Tell the shipyards to accelerate production. If they're going to hesitate, we'll make sure they regret every second of it." Outside, in the void between stars, the shadows grew longer, and within them, humanity moved.